Hello and welcome back to All for United, and it's that time of week again. It's just another United transfer show. How are we doing, guys? If you don't know by now, this is the show where we look at all the current transfer dealings that are going on around United at the moment. Point being, there's not a lot at the moment, so we're struggling to find a lot of things to talk about. But we have got a few bits we can chat about today. But first of all, I'm delighted to say I'm joined once again by my great friend Hayder. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. Really excited for this one. I think it's going to be a good one. Obviously, talking about the Glazers, so something a bit different.
Yeah, we'll touch on what we're going to talk about in a second. Kieran, I think it's the second time I work with you, mate. You're on the show again. Good to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, very good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm very well, mate. Thank you. And Paulie, you're joining us all the way from the sunny United States. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. I'm excited. I've been speaking with Kieran and Hayder all week on the awful place that is Twitter, and I'm excited to talk to them face to face because I have a feeling we are going to disagree about some things.
Yeah, but this is like we were just saying off air. Twitter, it's an interesting place right now. In terms of the transfer stuff that United are doing, everyone's looking for someone to blame because, let's be honest, one thing we can all agree on, we're very frustrated with how things are going this summer. Everything's been slow. Things aren't going the way we'd want them to. So naturally, people are frustrated. And when you do that, you're looking for someone to blame. But we are going to kick off today with the Glazers. And I don't think there's any other place to start, to be honest. I think it's been well documented in the last few days that, Joel Glazer in particular has started to get involved now in transfer dealings. And we'll talk about why that might be in a minute. But one of the things that does frustrate me about the Glazers is it seems window in, window out, every window, they really struggle to execute the big deals. We have done big deals under the Glazers. They have been done, but it just seems to always be hard work. So I'm going to simply start with you, Hayder, and just ask you, why do you think it is that the Glazers constantly struggle to get these big deals, like, for example, this summer, Jadon Sancho, over the line?
I think before you delve into that, I think you have to go and have a look at how they took over the club, and that's really important. If you remember back in 2005, there was a lot of opposition from shareholders and supporters. Obviously, there's a green and gold supporters protest, which went even up until 2010, 2011. And when the Glazers took over, I think when they took control, it's down to the fact that they did it through a leveraged buyout plan, which obviously involves borrowing against the future assets to buy that asset. So essentially, the problem was, or is, that they never bought the club with their own money. They used, and then they saddled United with all the debt. And, after 75 years being debt-free, United suddenly had hundreds of millions of pounds of debt on the club. And, sort of at one point, the Glazers' interest payments were hitting £60 million per year. And this is the debt that isn't United's debt, it's the Glazers' debt, but they've saddled the club. And when you look at the payments that could be met due to, sort of significant on-pitch success, you saw that we have the booming TV rights, you have, the exploitation of the club's commercial potential. So there are ways that United have been paying this debt. But then when you look at when Sir Alex has left, you've seen that the success has dried up. And what's happened is year on year, United have had less money to spend. And look, just to break a few things down, because I was reading The Athletic today, but, the Glazers have personally received close to £200 million from the club since that £790 million leverage takeover. Although they've had a very lucrative commercial strategy, which has helped the club. And I think you can't say that they haven't done some good, because United is the global powerhouse commercial juggernaut it is today, due to the fact that they have a very, very strong, commercial plan. But I think when you're looking at it, you've seen that it's been copied by other clubs as well. And although there are 6 Glazer siblings sitting on the board, it is Joel who is essentially the big boss. He spends 8 hours a day apparently working on United, and obviously the United sort of day-to-day work from his Washington, D.C. office. And the problem is that Joel Glazer is the one that sanctions the signings. And he only does it after he's being convinced of their value. And he has confidence that this is the right player to bring in. My problem with that is that, for one, it's just micromanaging. You having someone sign off on every little detail that by the time that happens, other clubs have already made the transfer. So what you're seeing is this consistent. That's why there is, I guess, a one one transfer to be focused on at a time, because what's happening is you're having powers from above controlling it. And it seems to me that it goes from Matt Judge to Ed Woodward to Joel Glazer, back to Ed Woodward to Matt Judge. And that is not constructive or seamless or efficient at all. What it is essentially is just, like I said, that micromanaging aspect. And I think a lot of United fans are upset because of the fact they've taken out close to $1.5 billion out of the club, when realistically United could have pumped that money into the club. We could have improved the stadium, made it bigger, or built another stadium. It was said that the owners originally wanted to rebuild Old Trafford, but when they took over, but it's believed that the full sort of revamp now doesn't make financial sense. When actually, as you've seen, you look at the season ticket prices, I don't think our match day revenues increased much over the last 5 years because of the fact that the Glazers have frozen the ticket prices, which is a great move, I think. But the issue is now that obviously if you're not going to make the stadium bigger, then less revenue can come in through that stream. So look at the situation now. United are such a big, like I said, commercial juggernaut that there are very few potential buyers out there, apart from possibly the Saudis, but that comes with different problems in terms of human rights, etc., etc. So what you're seeing now is that the Glazers can demand whatever they want. And as I was saying earlier, taking $1.5 billion out of the club in terms of interest, debt, and other outgoings is just simply unacceptable. In that same time, we've seen City's owners plow in around $1 billion. I'm not saying everything the Glazers have done is bad, because I think looking at the commercial plan and strategy, it's incredible. We have now 65 commercial partners or sponsorships on our official website, which is phenomenal. And there's so many other teams who are trying to follow that model. But when the success on the pitch dries up, these sponsors are going to turn around and say, well, we want to be associated, our product has to be associated with success. Yeah. So for me, look, until they go, because we need football men in footballing positions. We said this before, we looked at Bayern Munich. The fact that Ed Woodward was managing transfers is wrong. The fact that Joel Glazer is choosing whether to buy a player based on finances or analytics, he doesn't know anything about how a player should play. He can be interested. I'm sure he's interested in the sport, but he doesn't know who's a good player, who's a good fit. You know, these sort of footballing things that a footballing person would know. So for me, the problem is that disconnect between the footballing side, the commercial side, and what we're seeing now is that we've got commercial people on football deals when we should be buying players with footballing people in footballing positions. And it starts with director of football, unfortunately. So that's kind of my take on the whole Glazer situation and the ownership.
No, thank you. I mean, I agree with a lot that you're saying there, Hader, and I'm sure United fans will as well. Just to remind you guys, we are live. Sorry, I didn't say at the start of the show. We are live, and we're desperate to hear from you guys. We had a couple of comments in already, sort of echoing what you're saying, Hader, and a lot of people agreeing with what you're saying. We are like, I just want to drag this one up quickly. This is coming from Chris Avey. Harry Maguire drama. We won't be talking about that on the show today. I don't think there's any show that's sort of relevant for at the moment, because there is a police investigation ongoing, and I think it's important for that to sort of get resolved before we delve into all that. So we won't be talking about that on the show today, and I think it's probably wise for everybody else to avoid it. But I'm going to come to you next, Paulie. I know you've got your thoughts on the Glazers as well. Do you feel the same as Hader? And if you do, if the club is flawed in the way it's structured, how can they change that?
For the most part, I feel the same as Hader. And the club is flawed in the way it's structured. But the way that a lot of fans and some of what Hader just said, the way that the direction that the anger is directed in is the wrong direction. And everything that Hader said, from the takeover and the leveraged buyout, that's all true. But once Sir Alex Ferguson retired, they weren't unwilling to spend. They started throwing money everywhere. They had a bid for Gareth Bale that went through, and Bale chose to go to Real Madrid. And they ended up with Fellaini and only Fellaini because of Ed Woodward's incompetence. And then the next year they spent a lot of money, and the year after that they spent a lot of money. Since Sir Alex Ferguson has retired, in terms of net spend, only Manchester City is beyond them. Now, when it comes to Joel Glazer now wanting to get involved and signing off on transfers, I don't see what the big deal is. And let me explain that here. do you blame him for that? When you have an ownership group that opened up their checkbook and said, yeah, go out there and spend money, and you're signing off on Angel Di Maria and, Ander Herrera and Fellaini and Juan Mata, and you've set a new transfer record how many times, and Luke Shaw, and there's no success. And then all of a sudden, Jose Mourinho comes in and he signs Eric Bailly in his first year. Then he signs Victor Lindelof in his second year. And in his third year, he says, I need a center back. As the owner whose money you are spending, to me, it's totally reasonable to say, hold on a minute, wait, where's my money going? And before I sign off on these transfers now, I want to know a little bit more to make sure that we're bringing in the right player and that we are investing this money correctly. And as the owner, I don't have the problem with that. It's his money. And if he wants to know that where his money's going, by all means. We heard the same story about Harry Maguire. We heard the same story about Bruno Fernandes. At the end of the day, they signed him. So clearly they brought him the evidence and he signed off on it. Now, as Hader said, it seems like it goes from Matt Judge to Ed Woodward to Joel Glazer. That is inefficient. I don't think United have ever lost out on a player because of the fact that it was taking a long time. It's just that it takes a long time, and it is frustrating as hell that it takes a long time. And it's completely inefficient. And it is a Joel Glazer problem that they have this inefficiency in place. He's the owner. He can change it. And like Hader said, it starts with the director of football. You got into this mess because you had Ed Woodward, who has zero football experience, pulling the strings and calling the shots willy-nilly. And he signed a lot of bad players to big money contracts and players or good players who didn't fit the manager. And it created this financial mess. And Joel Glazer didn't do anything about that. And so I'm not so disturbed that he wants to sign off on the transfer. I'm more disturbed that you've been running at an inefficiency for 7 years now, and he has no concern with fixing that.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fair point as well. I take that. Do you want to come back on that, Hader? Have you got anything else to add on that? Or
yeah, one thing I do want to add is just a statement that was from the Man United Supporters Trust, and that was that this is what they said. So not investing in a single penny might be considered an ownership crime by fans at most clubs. But far worse than that, they've extracted colossal sums from Manchester United. When all interest and charges on their leverage buyout is added up, plus money they've paid themselves, because since post 2016, they've taken 22 million a year. That's gone to the Glazers and the hedge fund managers who own shares, meaning there's less money available on the pitch. Plus related debt still on the club. They've taken more than 1 billion and it's still rising. No owner in the history of football in any country ever has taken so much money from a club. So I agree with Paulie that, look, it is their money, but at the end of the day, they bought the club on money they didn't have. They bought the club and they've used the brand and they've essentially just pillaged the brand to make more money for themselves, and they're not investing it properly in the team. I understand that they've spent close to £1 billion and it has been spent badly. But the whole point is that every time we've got to a stage where we're looking to progress, when he came second, that was a perfect summer to back him and to progress. This summer now, it's a perfect summer to progress. We've got, Ollie's done what he's had to do. We've got third. Seemingly impossible to get top four back in January or December time. We have to invest and we're dragging our heels. So the point is that it might seem like, yes, they've made so much money, but when you're looking at the fact that, and something I picked up on earlier is that in sort of 2017, we had £270 million more revenue than Liverpool. In 2018, that was reduced to 135 million. Teams are catching us up. So for years, we've been saying, oh, we're the commercial giant, but other teams are more attractive right now. It hurts me to say this, but Liverpool and City are more attractive to the younger fan, to players. I mean, look at Thiago, for example. It's just an example. Would he have ever moved to Liverpool if Klopp wasn't there and they weren't challenging for titles and Champions Leagues? No, he wouldn't. And that's the point, that we can talk about his commercial success all the time. And I agree with Paulie, we have spent money, but when it's mattered, we haven't spent the money. And this summer is so, so important. Jadon Sancho has to be signed. A midfielder has to be signed. A centre-back has to be signed, bare minimum. And it's not happening. And that's my problem.
I completely agree with you. That they are lousy. Go ahead, finish.
I was saying, until the Glazers go, until Ed Woodward's pushed into a commercial role, United aren't going to be able to challenge for titles. They're not going to move forward. And that's the point. So to say Joel Glazer, I completely agree with you. He doesn't do the day-to-day running. But the fact he's micromanaging like that, what is his money? But what does he know about Jadon Sancho? That's to say he's not worth 120 million euros, because Jadon Sancho can come into Man United, take the number 7 shirt. He's genuinely a world-class generational talent. That's how highly he's rated around the world. Every top club would be in for him next season. What gives Joel Glazer the right to say, no, I don't think he's worth that money, when he could hold that right wing for 10 years plus? That's my point.
I agree with you. They are terrible owners, and they're taking money from the club, and that's money that they didn't buy from the club. Their opportunities were there to push forward. In 2018, though, they did have financial issues in that they had been spending wildly for the last 3 years. And 2 of those transfers that appeared to be free, Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Henrik Mkhitaryan, Alexis Sanchez, which was a swap, were not actually free. They had to pay a lot of money in agents' fees and other bonuses. They paid Mino Raiola about £15 million on top of his cut of the transfer fee for Paul Pogba. They weren't in a position to spend money because of FFP laws. They stay compliant. And you could say what you want about FFP and how City and PSG have seemingly gotten away with circumventing those laws, but every other club in Europe is following those laws. Chelsea broke a different rule and got a transfer ban. United could say, we're not going to play by the rules, but are you willing to risk getting a transfer ban? And for all we know, the Glazers, again, and this summer, absolutely a prime time to spend money and push forward, but it hasn't happened yet. The window didn't close yesterday. It just hasn't happened yet, and it's frustrating that it hasn't happened yet, and it's frustrating that we have to wait. But I refuse to mark it as a failure when there's a chance that they could bring in 3 players before the season starts. The window's open for another 6.5 weeks, and the season starts in about 3 weeks. So right now, it just seems like the attitude is that we've already marked it down as a failure when, there's still plenty of time. There is no difference between Jadon Sancho arriving today and Jadon Sancho arriving next Thursday. I understand the desire to bring players in before preseason. That's always what a manager wants, but we don't have a preseason this year. Our players are right now on 2-week holiday. Then they come back. Most of them are going to go to their international teams because there's Nations League games. And then we're coming back a week before the season. For us, it'll be 2 weeks. And that's when our preseason is. So as long as you get your players in then, which is in about 3 weeks, that's basically the deadline that a manager typically wants. And I understand it's frustrating, but it isn't over yet. And that's why we can't just mark it down as an F right now, because we just got to give it time.
Yeah, no, look, this is a really interesting debate. And in terms of how we criticize the great Glazers, I think we could go on for hours. And I mean, we could dig even deeper into the numbers. But I'm going to come to you, Kieran, because you're being so patient. Mate. Obviously,
sorry about that, Kieran.
It's still on the Glazers, and I'm going to give you your opportunity to have your say. But for me, I'm starting to wonder now if they're becoming more involved, because actually the money's not there. We heard about this £140 million credit that they took out. Well, it was rumoured a couple of months ago, and then it sort of reared its ugly head again. But we're hearing now that was to offset match day losses of up to £4 to £5 million per home game. Now, we are the transfer show, and we're here to talk about transfers. Is he starting to get involved because he actually feels that 120 million now is all of a sudden unreasonable for a player? Is the money
honestly, I don't think so. I think the Glazers have plenty of money. They own 2 of the biggest franchises in the world. You look at Manchester United. Yes, they didn't buy it with their own money, but when they originally had bought it for what it was around $800 million, it's now worth $1.65 billion. You look at when they bought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over in America, they spent $192 million, and now they're worth $2.2 billion. So I don't think it's anything to do with, do the Glazers have money? I don't think if it's anything to do with, do Manchester United have money? We've seen it in the last couple windows. We spend. But the issue I think happened was when Woodward took over from David Gill, we had probably a good 4 or 5 year period where we spent money and the majority of that money was then gone because it was players that really didn't affect the team as much as we wanted to. And that was the issue. When you buy Di Maria for, at that time, was a record signing, and about 12 to 18 months later, he's gone, and you sell him for less than you bought him, that's an issue. So for me, I think it's not that the money is not there. I think it's that, and when we talked about there before with Joe Glazer getting involved, I think the reason he's getting involved is because he needs to make sure that the money's actually being spent, and then in another year or 2 years' time, we're not going back in trying to get another player in, let's just say Jadon Sancho's position. Now, we don't think that's going to happen because we think that Sancho is great and everything. But at the time, I remember it when Di Maria came. There was a lot of people that were really excited when he came. Same thing when Falcao, and then we didn't think that the next year he was going to be gone and we had to then buy another player. You look at because I follow the NFL as well, and because they own both teams, I would do a bit of a comparison. This year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they spent money on Tom Brady. Now, that's one of the biggest moves that would happen in years in the NFL. It's not that they don't have money. They're able to spend it. They're getting hit both financially in America for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they're not going to have fans in the stadium. And that's where they get a lot of the money over there as well, and with their TV deals, etc. And then the same thing for Man United. It's not that they don't have the money or that they're not willing to spend it, but it's like any business, is that if you want to spend a good amount of money, you have to be able to come up with, well, what's the reason that this needs to be spent? And
exactly.
If the Glazers aren't 100% sold on it, it's going to take time. And the problem is, I think, let's just say if it was David Gill and for years was spending it and the money was going to the right players, like the likes of when Evra, Vidic and all came in, I don't think the Glazers would have a problem in giving the money and saying, okay, I trust you. But if the fans can't even trust Ed Woodward, and honestly, I think the only reason that he's still in there is because he does well for them financially.
Yeah.
And the problem is the structure there is the issue. Really, I don't think the Glazers get too involved. Again, if you go and research it over in the NFL, they don't tell the Tampa Bay Buccaneers GM what to do, okay? Because they trust them. And he is the one that controls what happens in the organization, their GM. That's the way that the Glazers are using Manchester United. Instead, they have Ed Woodward doing that. But the problem is the structure is broken. We've seen it for about 5 or 6 years that there's been stories every single year about a director of football. Why hasn't it not come in? The reason why is because Ed Woodward doesn't want to give away that power. Before, when it came up about a director of football, I think it was really popular because there was a lot of other clubs doing it at the time, and it was to be like the head of transfers and things like that. Yeah. But it was very clear from the first few stories that Ed Woodward did not want to lose control of transfers because he wanted to be the one to put his chest out when Man United would sign a player. He did it not, I think it was the first or second year after Ferguson was gone, where he did that ridiculous interview on MUTV and said that the things that Manchester United can do, no other club can do. So now what do you think is going to happen? We have to pay larger fees because people know you have money and you're desperate. And that's, for me, the issue.
No, absolutely brilliant. And great to get your take on it as well, Kieran, obviously, from looking at the comparison. I mean, I watch a bit of NFL, but I really don't know how it works. I'm just hoping that Tom Brady can help them win yeah, and maybe they'll invest some of the money back from that into us. Just an interesting point made here by Minak about this idea that we have to sort of be in transition and get rid of some players before others. Now, I heard this suggestion from Daniel Story yesterday on the transfer Q&A, and he said something of similar ilk that United may be looking to get some players out the door before they actually conclude their business. But I'm going to move it on now and talk about some of the players that we have been mentioned with in the last couple of days. And if it's those players are coming through the door, I would hope as a club we would not have to sell to get them in. So we're going to look at Gabriel and we're going to look at David Brooks. Now, the reported fee for Gabriel is around 22.7 million. Am I right by saying that? Maybe rising something a little higher. And David Brooks, I think the fee is reported around £40 million. Now, that is a combination, obviously, of around, let's call it £65 million. If United are having to get players out to get those deals done, we're in trouble. But I do want to come to you quickly, Hader. I'll start with you on the Gabriel stories. Now, I weren't sure what to make of this yesterday, and I'm probably still not. But one thing that I have noted is this decision that he's meant to be making just keeps getting delayed and delayed. Like we heard last week that it was going to be beginning of this week that he was going to make his decision, and then all of a sudden last night, United are coming in, and the rumor is that maybe he needs a bit more time now, and that will concur because it has gone very quiet now all of a sudden. Yesterday, there was reports he was going for a medical to Arsenal, but there's been no sign of him in London so far, I don't think, or anywhere. So do you actually think that actually United might get this over the line at the last minute?
I just want to quickly say the notion that United have to sell before they buy is ridiculous, because if you actually look at how many players during Ollie's tenure we've sold, it's 7, and we've only brought 5 in. And even when we sold the likes of Lukaku, I know that Greenwood stepped up, but that was a massive gamble. So the point is that how many more players have to leave before we can actually spend some money? That's the thing that I don't understand. Why do we have to let go of some centre backs? We've got Sanchez's wages off the bill. That's almost £500,000 a week. Lukaku's obviously off the bill. Smalling's not here at the moment. So on Sanchez's wage, you could bring in 3-4 good players. So that's the thing that I'm not understanding, because how many more players have to go before they actually pull the finger out? Herrera went and he wasn't replaced. I know Bruno came in later. Fellaini went, he wasn't replaced. I know we've had McTominay and Fred step up, but the point is that the squad in some areas is at its bare bones in terms of quality. We're going on to Gabriel. I think that I was very similar in your sort of thought process that, okay, it's just United's name being put in there. I spoke to Kieran about this as well yesterday, and it's United's name putting in there just to hurry up the deal, because we've seen that many times, haven't we? There was the whole Benteke transfer when Tim Sherwood discussed United's interest and Liverpool went and spent the money. You saw it with Firmino as well at Hoffenheim. As soon as you mentioned United's name, Liverpool went and paid the fee. So there's always that worry, isn't it, that whenever a player or an agent or a club wants more money, just put United's name in there and you're going to go and get yourself more money. But I think this one is a little bit strange. I saw The Independent said today that, look, if Gabriel wanted to sign for Arsenal, it'd be done by now. I honestly think that there's concrete interest from us. Whether we're going to take that any further is another story. I spoke to someone yesterday, did a podcast with a Napoli fan, and I was talking to him about Gabriel, and he was saying that the Koulibaly deal is probably going to happen, but that obviously Gabriel hinges on Koulibaly. So if United can go in there and just put the money down, I do think that we're more attractive than Arsenal. Maybe there's the idea that Gabriel will play more at Arsenal, but United can offer Champions League. I think United are a better side. They're a side on the up. You know, it's Man United. Well, full disrespect to Arsenal, you're not on the level of Man United. Yeah. So for me, I think there's definitely legs in it, but I'm not going to turn around and say I think it's going to happen. I still think he'll probably sign for Arsenal, but it's definitely quiet. He hasn't made his decision, even though apparently he has agreed personal terms. So I think it'd be a fantastic signing. I just want to see someone come in and something different, because Bailly can't keep fit. I'm a fan of him, but you can't rely on him. Tuanzebe, I'm a massive fan. He, for me, would be the one I'd like to see partnering Maguire, whoever's playing centre back. He can't keep fit. Lindelof's, I think, a good footballer, but not a very strong defender under the area ball. That partnership's not working. So someone like Gabriel, left-footed, can play out the back. He's fast. He's composed, young, and 22 million plus add-ons is a relatively low-risk transfer. So, yeah, I think it'd be a great transfer, but I'm not too sure. This is too much smoke without fire, so perhaps we will come in and hijack it.
Yeah. I'm like you. I just feel like we need something to kickstart this window. Don't you agree, guys? Foot in the door. You feel if one comes in, then there could be a little influx. You know, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
But I just want I just want to come to you, Paulie, quickly on this. I mean, you know, where are United, though, with these deals? You know, it's been clear that Gabriel's wanted to move all summer. You know, there's the interest from Arsenal, Napoli's been there for weeks. You know, I think they've probably even agreed a fee now for quite a while with Lille and been talking to Gabriel. Where have United been if they seriously want this player? Once again, why are they dilly-dallying?
I don't know, because I don't know what exactly is going on. What we all have to understand is that when Ed Woodward picks up the phone and speaks to a Borussia Dortmund or a Gabriel, or obviously he's speaking to their agents, what he doesn't do is hang up the phone and immediately call up a reporter from the Daily Mail and tell him, this is what I just did. And the way transfers work, the way they used to work was you called up a club, you negotiated a fee, you submitted a bid, and they said yes or no. If they said no, you negotiated more, you submitted another bid. And then they said yes, and then you spoke to the player. For some reason, teams are afraid to submit bids now until they have everything worked out. They do everything with the player at first. So like Hader said, if Gabriel wanted to join Arsenal, he'd be at Arsenal right now. It does seem like his agent is just throwing Man United's hat into the ring to try to drum up a better contract. But again, why hasn't he accepted it yet? But in this case, it's not that United are stalling on the deal. It's maybe Gabriel is waiting on a decision because his agent is negotiating with United. We don't have to worry about Lille in this situation because he has a release clause. Every bid that everybody has made, Napoli, Everton, Arsenal, everybody that's been reporting this have all made the same bid, which tells you it's a release clause. So it's not like United will have to negotiate with the player and then turn around and negotiate with the club. Yeah. If they work out personal details and Gabriel calls up United and says, I want to sign for you, they'll submit that bid in an hour and lock it up. And there's no such thing as, they're waiting until it's too late or it's too late. I mean, Willian was at the airport to sign with Tottenham when Chelsea swooped in. David Silva was going to Lazio a few weeks ago, and Real Sociedad swooped in. Until somebody signs that contract, there is no such thing as too late. So if Gabriel is walking into Arsenal's training ground to sign a contract and his phone rings and it's Ed Woodward saying, we want you here, we're going to agree to your wage demands, etc., and Gabriel says, right, okay, I'd rather go to United, he would stop walking and turn around and United would get the deal done. Yeah. So it's just frustrating because patience is a virtue and none of us have it, but we just have to be patient.
I think though, Paulie, the hesitance from United to make bids comes from probably the summer of 2013 when they seemed to make very public bids for Cesc Fabregas, for example. The first one being 26.1 million, the second one probably being 26.2 million, and the third one probably, you've guessed it, 26.3 million. And all you do is you make yourself look silly. And I think United have probably learned from there. And of obviously, like you said, now want to make sure everything is honky dory before they make that bid public or actually submit it to a club. Kieran, I'll come to you quickly on Gabriel. I mean, we know what's coming here, don't we? If he doesn't sign, you're going to get all the pro-Glazier fans out there having a go at Gabriel. You've chosen Arsenal. You've made the wrong decision. But let's be honest, mate. I mean, if the guy does go to Arsenal or Napoli or any of these clubs that have been interested from the outset, United can't really have any complaints because he'll see a club there that's shown willing for him, showed intent, and they've made it happen, and that should mean a lot to a player, I think.
Yeah, what I think is probably happening is Gabriel is on a list of centre backs that United are interested in. It's already come out that they have been interested in him, but they have not even spoken to Lille. They've only spoken with his representatives when they came over to England. They probably were speaking to Arsenal and Everton at the time as well. So Manchester United probably put in their interest. So my opinion on this is that if Gabriel was choosing where he'd want to go, he's obviously stalling just in case Manchester United put in a bid. That's where I am at the moment. I think he's on a list, but I do not think he's the number one player on that list. I think from everything that's come out, and even I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, I did a story on the different centre backs that we were linked to. Really, I think Gabriel's maybe plan B. I think Pau Torres is the style of centre back that they want from Villarreal. But the problem is he actually has a release clause, which is about, I think they said it's between 50 and 70 million. Now, the one thing that I did when I was researching this yesterday on Gabriel is he actually doesn't have a release clause. The reason why everybody's bidding the same is actually the club is being fair to the player and saying that if anybody meets this demand, we will will accept it, and that we're not going to start a bidding war so that you don't get the move that you want. And that's what they've done with Gabriel. So really, the transfer all comes down to the player. If he, like Hader said, is if he wanted to go to Arsenal, he'd be an Arsenal player already. If Koulibaly was gone from Napoli, he'd be a Napoli player already. There's obviously a reason that he's waiting, because we were told 2 weeks ago it would be 2 days and he would make his decision. Well, then we were told it was supposed to be today, but now it's been delayed again. So I think he's either stalling for Koulibaly to get sold, or he's stalling for a late bid from Manchester United. And that's the only way I can read into it, because like we've said, if he wanted to go to Everton or if he wanted to go to Arsenal, that deal would have been done already.
Yeah. No, fantastic insight there, and into how this deal might be working. And I tend to agree with you. I mean, the Koulibaly is not a transfer. Sorry, the Koulibaly deal is not a transfer that's going to get done quickly, is it? It's going to be a hard day. And I think whoever does get Koulibaly, it's going to take time, even someone who's efficient like City. Now, I just want to pull this comment up here. Someone's put Grealish question right now. I purposely brought that up because I've not heard much on Grealish in the last few days, so we're not going to talk about Jack Grealish, but we have heard rumours about David Brooks potentially coming in. And the question I want to ask to you guys is, to satisfy the appetite of United fans, David Brooks surely has to be the alternative to Jack Grealish rather than the alternative to Jadon Sancho. What's your thoughts on that, Ada? Because I just don't think that will wash for United fans if we sign Brooks instead of Sancho.
Me and Paulie had a big discussion yesterday on this. Look, when the £40 million came out, I tweeted saying that's a ridiculous fee. And that's not to knock Brooks as a player, because actually before his injury, I thought he was a really exciting upcoming talent. He was brilliant for Bournemouth, and he hasn't looked right since the injury. That's because obviously it takes time to recover, both mentally and physically. He hasn't looked quite as fit as he's looked before. But my issue is that if United were going for Brooks as an alternative to Sancho, that's a massive problem, a massive step down. But when you're looking at it, £40 million again was too expensive. But I said, look, £25 million bring him in. Is he better than Lingard and Pereira? Yes. Has he got the ceiling to improve? Yes. Then that's definitely a very shrewd signing, I would say. My issue is that United have shown in the past that when they haven't got their first choice or their big name signing, they did this back in 2013. We couldn't get Toni Kroos. We couldn't get Fabregas. Who do we get? Marouane Fellaini. That the gulf in the drop in class between our first choice and, let's say, a Brooks is massive. That's not to say Brooks can't be a top player, but the way I think, and I know Paulie's definitely going to disagree with me on this, but United have a very, very young starting 11 and young squad. We've got some really exciting young talents. Greenwood's brilliant. Williams can be a good player. Rashford's brilliant. Martial's still young. But what we need and what we lacked against Sevilla and what we've lacked over the season, I think, is that game management and that streetwise edge. And that comes with players with experience who've been there and done it. And we've lost 3 semi-finals. For me, that suggests that United don't have enough winners in the squad and they don't have enough, I would say, ready-made world-class talent. So for me, when you look at Thiago, and I spoke to Tom McDermott on my podcast the other day, and he said to me that United definitely would love a player like Thiago. But the problem is, one, he probably wouldn't want to come to United over, let's say, Liverpool. And that's no disrespect to United, and that's hard for me to admit. But at this very moment in time, Liverpool are a more attractive proposition with a team that's ready-made. And he is, I suppose, he can slip right in and take them to the next level. Yeah. But for me, when a player like Thiago is available, who's the conductor of Bayern Munich, who are arguably the best side in Europe, at 30 million, and 29 isn't old. 29, that doesn't mean just because you turn 30, you're going to go into decline. And that's where me and Paulie have had that discussion. For me, that is a no-brainer, and it fits the profile of what United should be signing as well. We want young talent. We also want world-class talent. You don't pass up on an £80 million player who is just phenomenal and go and sign someone because they're younger and they could have good potential. Because for me, Brooks is never going to get to Thiago's level. And that's not disrespect to Brooks. That's just how good Thiago is. So my point is that Brooks as an alternative to Grealish at, let's say, 25, 30 million, definitely. That's a much better deal. I'm a big fan of Grealish, but he's nowhere near 50 million, let alone 80. And United would be mad to pay that money. But Sancho has to come in. A Brooks, I'm happy with. But for me, a Thiago and Van der Beek, 2 players, one's world-class, one can be world-class. That's where United should be spending the money.
Yeah, and the interesting comment here from Squirrelmine, Liverpool negotiating 30 million. Maybe we're not the only ones just trying to get a deal this summer, are we? You know what I mean? Interesting that, you have to negotiate at that figure for such a world-class player, like you say. But I'll let you, obviously, Hayder said that he'd been having chats with you on this, Paulie, and you've got thoughts on, obviously, David Brooks and Thiago and players like that. What would you say in reply to what Hayder's saying?
Yeah, we spoke yesterday, and I think we kind of got lost in that it kind of turned into a David Brooks or Thiago thing, and it definitely is not that. Like Hayder said, David Brooks is not a replacement for Jadon Sancho. You have to bring Sancho in, and if you're not, and if Aston Villa are going to say 80 million for Jack Grealish, then yeah, you walk away from that, and David Brooks could be an option there. Thiago at 29, my thing, there's two things here. One is the age, and the other is how available is he? So he turned down a contract with Bayern Munich, who did try to extend him, and all of a sudden they said it turned into he said no, and he wants to go to Liverpool. There have been no other teams linked with him. So it really just seems like he wants to go to Liverpool, and we know that Jurgen Klopp wants him, and Liverpool are refusing to pay the 30 million. And like you just said, Liverpool negotiating over 30 million. Maybe we're not the only club. Well, Jurgen Klopp's number one transfer target this summer was Timo Werner, who had a very reasonable release clause considering the player that Timo Werner is. And he went to his owners after winning Liverpool's first Premier League in 30 years. He won the Champions League last year, and he said, "This is my number one guy." And they said, no. And now he's going to them and he's saying, Thiago. And they're saying, no. So we, say, the Glazers aren't backing Ollie. But I mean, how much more can Jurgen Klopp do before his owners back him? He is 29, and that is an age where you start to go into decline. Wayne Rooney was already in decline at 29. Robin van Persie gave us one world-class year before falling off when we signed him at 29, and that world-class year wasn't even as good as the year before or the year before that. So he was already in decline. He had about one good year left in him before injuries started to get the better of him, which happens when you hit 30. Juan Mata started he dropped off significantly when he hit 30. Matic is 32, and we've been saying that he's, on his last legs for 2 years now. That is what happens. Plus, Thiago has a massive injury history, and that's not exactly something that you want for somebody who's 30. You don't typically, if you have injury problems when you're 20 with your knees and your ligaments, you don't typically not have them once you turn 30. Is Thiago a brilliant player and a world-class player? Absolutely. And if this team was one piece away from being right at the top of the Premier League and winning the Champions League, then yeah, for 30 million, I would absolutely try to go make it happen, even though how available he is under question. But we're still in a rebuilding process where, Solskjaer said to Woodward last year, there are many reports this is of a 3-year plan. And you don't blow it up after year 2 or in year 2 to try to bring in a player who is what we used to bring in, when we brought in Alexis Sanchez at the age of 29, to try to blow it up. So it just goes against what the plan would be. And you also mentioned Van de Beek, who I would love to see him. He's a very good player, and I would love to see him come in, and he is well worth the 40 million, or 40 million is much better spent on him than on David Brooks. But I also ask, how available is he? We saw those reports that all of a sudden, he wanted to go to Real Madrid last year, and and there were reports this year that all of a sudden United's name got thrown into the ring, and it sounded like it came from his agent trying to get Real Madrid to put a move on it. And right around the same time, Real Madrid came out and said, we're not making any big signings because of COVID this summer. And since then, there's been quietness. It's not like he's been angling for a move elsewhere. There's just been complete quietness. So to me, it just sounds like he wants to go to Real Madrid. And if that's not going to happen, he's happy staying where he is.
Yeah.
Interesting, Paul. And it's, you guys can't see the other guys along the bottom here as Paul is talking, but I'm listening to him saying that Thiago's got past his peak at 30 and he's coming out of his prime and things like that. And I'm seeing Kieran shaking his head furiously at the bottom. Yeah. I will say, guys, we do all love each other at all points.
We do.
There's nothing wrong with a little bit of healthy debate. And, it's one of those things, it wouldn't work if we all agreed and just sort of kissed each other and kissed each other's backsides and said, "Yeah, you're right, mate. Everyone's entitled to their opinion." So we'll quickly ask you about this, Kieran. Your thoughts on maybe someone like Thiago coming in?
I think it's a no-brainer. It's the perfect signing that we need. We need someone that can stabilize the midfield, kind of like, I think Daniel Story mentioned it yesterday, the kind of quarterback style of central midfielder. We don't need someone that's going to do the same thing as Paul Pogba or Bruno Fernandes that's going to be in the starting 11. We need someone that can play behind them. The idea that when you're 29 you're going into decline, for me, is ludicrous, because one of the examples that was used was Wayne Rooney. Wayne Rooney was playing first team football at 17.
Yeah.
16
even.
Yeah.
So when he was playing, he got some terrible injuries and still played almost every game that he possibly could when he was available.
Yeah.
So he was bound to get into decline. And the way he played, like, you look at him when he was younger, and so he's there creating a chance, and then 30 seconds later he's running back all the way into the defensive line. He was one player that gave everything. The other one with Robin van Persie, again, for him, is just he went through a lot of injuries, and that really did affect him. I don't think Thiago is the same. He started his career at Barcelona where he didn't start. He would come on because he was behind Xavi and Iniesta. So he started playing first team football a lot later than some of those players that were mentioned. And really, you look at him now and he doesn't have, you don't see any signs that he's going to decline. And I wouldn't say that 29 is the option. And also, it's not like you're paying 60 or 70 million for him. It's 30 million. We would, especially when you're talking about Brooks, that if that one was going to be for 40, then why not sign Thiago, who we actually should have signed back in 2013 and not messed that up, David Moyes.
Yeah. No, and that's fair enough. And unfortunately, guys, we've been on here probably longer than we already should. So we have to wrap it up. I want to apologise to you, Kieran, in particular, because you wrote a brilliant article earlier in the week about United's academy and the state of it compared to now. Well, now compared to what it was like a few years ago. I will hand over to you quickly just to tell us what the article's called, where people can go and check it out, and just briefly, if United do struggle to get signings over the line this summer, is the academy in a position where there are players ready to come through and help the squad?
It's in a stronger position than it has been in a long time. We're not going to see players come in like how Mason Greenwood have. He's a revelation. The one thing that I would say in terms of the article, it was basically to see like how important is the academy system going to be in 2020. My idea around it was because of the pandemic and really the fact that there's uncertainty in the market. And that's why you're seeing there's not big deals happening, because everybody's waiting for that first domino. It was like the year that the Neymar deal happened, that once the Neymar deal happened, those prices inflated. So we're kind of looking at the opposite. In terms of the academy now, I think the closest player to come through is probably going to be Ethan Laird. For me, if it wasn't for a particular injury and his timing of it, he probably would have got into the first team instead of Brandon Williams, because he's a more attacking wing back. Like, I remember, I think this is when Mason was maybe 16. Before Mason Greenwood came into the under-18 team, Ethan Laird at right back was Manchester United's top scorer. And then Mason Greenwood came in. So Ethan Laird is actually the type of wing back that you hear people asking United to buy, because we're so focused on we need an attacking wing back. We actually have one, but we just need to be able to give him the chance. The problem is a lot of Man United fans think the minute somebody comes into the squad that, they should be excellent and they should be one of the best players. But that's not the way it happens. The way Ollie brought Greenwood through is how youth players are supposed to be brought through. You're not supposed to push them in straight away. I always have this argument with Chelsea fans that they overhype every single player that comes through because they expect that once they come in, they're to play and hit the ground running. It's like with Tammy Abraham, where they try and compare him to Mason Greenwood when they don't realize Tammy Abraham's been playing senior football for about 4 or 5 years now, while Mason Greenwood got his first full year under his belt. There's a lot of players that are coming through, really. You can have a look at so many different ones. One that I'd like to see come through, especially if Lingard and Pereira go, is probably Arnaud Puigdemont so we bought him from Zaragoza about maybe 3 years ago, and he's a very kind of creative player, but he's more physical than I would say Lingard and Pereira are. So he would have a chance. I wouldn't be surprised though if he went out on loan.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mention Garner or Levitt because I think they're both going to go out on loan this year anyway. There's no reason for them to be playing under 23 football because they're too good for it. Like Levitt's already played for Wales to a certain extent. Same with Ethan Galbraith. He's played for Northern Ireland already. They're above the level of under 23s, but they're not to the level of actually playing week in and week out for Manchester United. So they need senior football. After that, you probably have to look at the under 18s, and we've seen one that came through was Ted Mengi, who got his debut, and he's the one to look out for. But actually, what Hader said earlier, where we kind of have to look at is players that are actually coming back in terms of Axel Tuanzebe. I think for me, when he was coming through, I thought that's a future Manchester United captain. The way he played when he was younger, he controlled every team when he was playing, whether it was with England or the youth ranks. The other thing is, and I'm a fan of this, is that Dean Henderson to come back. I've said it for the whole season, is let him and De Gea battle it out. At the end of the day, the one phrase that always comes to me is iron sharpens iron. You don't just hand a position to someone, let him come back and fight for it. And if it means telling Dean Henderson that, this year you'll be our cup goalkeeper, but we're going to give you this new contract, and then when we come to next year, you're going to be the number one, or maybe the year after that, you're going to be the number one. Dean Henderson is a Manchester United fan. He said it last year that he wants to play 200 plus times for Manchester United. So I'd say give him the chance. Look at those players that are going to come through. Look, there will be a couple that come through from the under 18s because they're a very talented group. There's a lot of them. I'd be talking 15 minutes about them if there was that. But the one thing that I would say is, for me, the one to look out for is Ethan Laird. I think I would be more surprised if he doesn't make a Premier League appearance this season.
Yeah, no, and thanks for that, Kieran. Like I say, you've got to check that article out. It's a brilliant article. Kieran lists some of the players that he would like to see in the team and he thinks are ready for the team, and players he hadn't even mentioned, like I said, but we have to stop there. We've been going for 52 minutes. You're so lucky to be able to look at us for 52 minutes. How lucky are you? I don't believe it. I just want to pick up, we've had some brilliant comments tonight. I'm afraid, I should say, I apologise that we haven't managed to get through them all. There's been lots of great discussion tonight. I do want to pick up on one, though. People talking about Gabriel's move, about, we should be sceptical about it because he's coming from a Farmers League. Now, I just want to remind you that this Farmers League has provided 2 of the Champions League semi-finalists this
We're the Farmers League now.
Yeah.
Bruno Fernandes came from a Farmers League also.
Exactly. Yeah. There we go. So just, let's be real, guys. All these leagues have got so much to offer. They've got the different qualities. I watched a lot of Bundesliga football before the Premier League came out, and I was surprised at just how good the standard is over there. And in fact, to be honest with you, the games behind closed doors over there were much better quality than they were in England. So I think we just need to be very careful what we're saying about Farmers League. I don't think such things exist now because players are willing to play all over Europe, and there's lots of big clubs in every league now. So we just need to,
I wouldn't pay attention to where they came from. One of our better centre back signings in recent years was Nemanja Vidic.
Yeah, from
He
Spartak
didn't come from.
yeah.
So
exactly. But like I say, guys, that's all we got time for today. Thank you so much for your time, Hayder. I know you're so busy, mate, with your pods again. If you haven't seen Hayder's pods, give them a plug, mate. Where can we find them?
Look in my bio as well. It's Premier League Trio podcast, and just type that into YouTube. So we're on YouTube. Some are video, some are audio. But yeah, exciting guests which will be announced. Well, recording tonight and be announced tomorrow. So definitely don't miss that one.
Thank you so much, mate. And Paulie, you're doing a lot of great stuff with us, and I'm sure you're writing articles all the time. You keep up the good work, mate. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me. Anytime.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Kieran, like I say once again, mate, keep up the great work. Thanks for coming on and all your time. Appreciate
thanks, Joe.
If you love transfers, and there's a lot of people still watching, so I think everyone's hungry for transfer news at the moment, do check out the transfer Q&A that Ben did yesterday with Daniel Story. I thought that was brilliant, to be fair. So real great insight into actually the way rumours get circulated and the way rumours get manufactured and why they get put out into the public the way that they do, plus some interesting snippets from him on what he thinks will happen with Jadon Sancho. People have already been saying, I look forward to tuning in on the Jadon Sancho signing special. Well, we'll be here, mate, with bells on it, with party hats and everything. We'll be delighted if that happens. But yeah, do watch the Transfer Q&A session show. Look on our channel. We've got loads of great content. I think the Good, the Bad, the Ugly show on Wednesday night that Rusty did for the first time was absolutely hilarious. He's going to get some great guests on there. Watch that on a Wednesday night. The Twan show. We have so much great content. So if you're here for the first time, do give the channel a subscribe, give this video a link, and get your notifications turned on. And I think we'll be back with you on Monday with another United transfer show. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.